Hi, welcome to the Logistics Business virtual show. I hope you're enjoying the opportunity to look at our exhibitor stands and the wider show. And as part of the show, we have our series of expert panels where we're joined by panelists from around the world of logistics to talk about some of the challenges, opportunities, and the areas of interest that are dominating the logistics industry at the moment. And for this panel, I'm delighted to say we're going to be discussing forklifts, an absolutely essential part of any logistics discussion. And I'm joined by three experts from the sector, and we will go through all the current matters of interest within forklift innovation, regarding power sources, regarding ergonomics, health, engineering, innovation, and hopefully there'll be some great innovation for you and insight. Please do feel free to ask questions of our experts using the text facility on your screen, and our experts will endeavour to answer those for you. So maybe I could ask the panel to start by introducing themselves, starting with you, Andy.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name's Andy Kellett, and I'm from Calagas. Three key words I'd like to bring to the party today. I'd love to talk about transitioning, bio-LPG and fuels of the future, and opportunities.
Thank you. Phil?
Hi, good morning. My name's Phil Mean. I work for Hyster Europe. I'm a product strategy manager with Hyster, and actually my main focus is counterbalance forklift trucks. And really we're asked to give a kind of little bit of context or a few words, and really I'd like to kind of focus on the change, the challenge, and actually what exciting times we're living in, especially in the logistics industry. I think we're in a real period of change. So. Okay,
fantastic. And Ron?
Good morning. My name is Ron Farr. I work for Yale Material Handling in Europe. I look after all of our automation and very narrow hull product. So what I like to look at when we talk about automation is, my three words would be mundane, affordable automation. Takes away the repetitiveness that nobody wants.
Well, I think that's a good place to start then. So why don't you tell us a bit about that, Ron?
Yeah, it's interesting that I was thinking actually recently, when you look at empowering workers, it's the driver that's always got the power, isn't it? And then I was thinking, do you remember in the movies when you'd got a lift operator and people would get onto the lift and somebody would control the lift and bring it to the different floors? And that doesn't exist anymore because we've automated all of the ability to accelerate and slow down and stop the lift at the right position. And we brought it to a point now where we're not any smarter. The lift has got smarter. All we know how to do is press the button for the floor that we want. And it enables all of us, no matter who you are, to have the ability to operate a lift. And is that the future of where we possibly could be going? That mundane, repetitive task of going up and down in a lift all day, it becomes an automated solution that a truck comes to you. You call a truck and you press a button and you tell the truck what you want it to be doing. Or it's pre-programmed to do that same monotonous task that you no longer have to have that chore, and especially now where there's more and more speed restrictions on a site. It feels like you're doing 30 miles an hour on a motorway sometimes, where you're just trundling along a big, long, straight corridor, but you've got no real high speed that you're allowed to use inside of the built-up area. And I think it's becoming less glamorous and less exciting. And I think that's where this automation is found a niche, that it works in collaboration with people.
So are you saying, though, bye-bye to the driver? That's what it sounds like, ultimately.
I think it's got a place where it is this monotonous element to the work. But I don't think we'll ever replace the driver. I think you'll always have a level of complexity. And I think that's where, certainly with the Yale products that we look at, we've got these dual mode capabilities. So the truck could do 90% of what the truck's meant to be doing all the time, but maybe 10% of the time there are things that happen that are just, they're outside of the norm. Maybe a wagon arrives and it's got a new printer for the office, and you think, well, how do I move it? That's where this dual mode system enables people to be able to manually operate a vehicle as well as use it as an automated truck. So you can bounce between the two. And we're seeing, I think, that in the car industry, where they're clearly talking about taking a car with a driver and having elements of it that will be autonomous, but you still got a driver. I know there's blue sky thinking where they remove a steering wheel, but I don't know, would you buy a car without a steering wheel and then find that it doesn't work on that new piece of road because that new piece of road hasn't been calibrated or mapped, or you sort of think, I'd like to have the steering wheel just in case something occurs that is out of the norm.
I think I agree, Ron. There's that, for some people, automation is going to make 100% sense. Earlier on the year, I was with a large multinational making fast moving goods, and they'd automated from their production line into their automated warehouse. It would deliver the loads automatically down to the end of conveyor belt, where a forklift truck puts it into the lorry. Because actually, sometimes the loads need to get moved around. They need to be put into different orders into the lorry to be able to go on to the next part of the logistics chain. And you just go, and automation really struggles with that variation. So sometimes you're just going to have a driver.
Yeah.
And what do you do? Beverage industry is really interesting, where you go, suddenly, oh, the World Cup's on. I now need to put twice as much beer out this week, 3 times. What do I do? A driver can drive faster. He can do his job quicker. Usually, there's a performance he can do. If he's working at 75% normally, he can go up to 100%. Automation's stuck at 75%, and that's all it can do. So there's definitely a case for both. I think it's going to be interesting, say, over the next 10 years, how automation progresses and just how far it pushes into that traditional driver role. Because certainly for counterbalance forklift trucks, especially if they're used outside, there are significant challenges to automation. Whereas in the warehouse environment, you kind of go, okay, there's a bit more control there. You can really see that developing a lot faster. But yeah, I think it's going to be for me, it's an interesting 10 years to see just how much it's going to progress.
Are you surprised, Phil, by how much it's changed in the last 10? And we see how much we've come on in the field of automation with warehouse trucks.
Am I surprised? I'm not going to say surprised. I think 10 years ago, you'd have gone, oh, automation, great idea, let's do it. And I think I think that's as my own company, but also generally with our other competitors, is just understanding the challenges that are involved. To load a lorry across a dock leveler consistently, there's not really anyone who's done that well. It's crazy how difficult it is. And just saying something as obvious as saying, well, you drive in forks first into the back of the lorry. You've got a load, so you can't see. Well, okay, that's not too bad for a driver, because if there was someone in the lorry, let's just say, they could shout out and the driver could hear them. An automated truck can't do that. And can you put sensors to see around the load? Well, not easily, because it's a very tight, closed-in environment. It's a massive challenge.
Yeah.
But is a fundamental part of that, final part of that logistics, getting out of the warehouse and to the next move. So yeah, I think there's some real big problems to solve. We will get there eventually as an industry, but I think that's going to take some time. And you know, a huge amount of developments going on in the automotive environment. But the automotive environment, you know what? If you park your car an inch out of place, no one cares. If you put your pallet an inch in the wrong place at 10 meters, it's going to fall. So we've got a much higher accuracy need in our business. So actually, we're not able to use all of the automotive technology and put it straight into our trucks just yet.
Cool.
And I think that's a big challenge, because as an industry, we don't have the kind of budgets that automotive have. So actually, we're a little bit more restrained on our technical development. So getting that in a hurry to the marketplace is probably not a good thing actually for customers. But it will come. It will happen eventually.
How does that sound from your perspective, Andy? From your perspective in the industry?
Yeah, I find that quite interesting. It's a good point you make about the counterbalance trucks that tend to cope far more admirably, very much with the supply and demand scenarios that certainly a lot of the big supermarket chains find coming over to Christmas and Easter periods, sort of thing. And the same with the brewery trade, who are very much like any World Cups or large sporting tournaments, suddenly found a massive demand on the products that they're providing. And the counterbalance obviously copes quite admirably with that, because it's a man in a truck, and you quite rightly stated, you know, it's quite easy to drive their performance levels up. Where with automation, I kind of guess you're struggling a lot more with being able to initially change settings and get the automation to work any quicker than it's currently set up to do. I think the other thing that'd be quite interesting is for automation is what we are moving down very much this just in time sort of ethos at the moment, where I kind of guess automation doesn't cope particularly well with that. You know, we're all leaving now until we have, you know, the bare minimum stock items sat on the shelves before the orders being placed. So I would suggest that's probably one of the biggest challenges that automation faces. But by the same token, I mean, from in our industry, we have seen a little bit of a move away from obviously counterbalance trucks being used indoors, and more going down the automation route. Obviously, we try to counteract that by providing trucks with catalytic converters on to try and address certainly the emissions perspective going forward. But it still remains a challenge for us to convince people that, you know, maybe counterbalance trucks with catalytic converters is an answer, but, you know, it's something we're working on.
Right. I mean, you've moved on there to the obvious next point of discussion, because as someone in the media, in the logistics media, whenever I see press news about forklifts from the big companies, there's always two themes. Number one is automation, which you've just been discussing so well, and the second is always motive power, and principally batteries, lithium ion, etc. But yeah, we're also seeing more LPG, as you know, Andy, of course, is an expert on that. Let me move on to that then, and get a view from you on where forklifts are going with power. Is the internal combustion engine dead, or is there always a role for it, simply as there's always a role for the driver? And which power sources do you think are going to be favoured in the years ahead? So let me come back to you first on that, Ron, and then I'll finish with Andy with his special perspective on it.
Yeah, Andy's the one that knows the answers, isn't he? So, yeah, I mean, my background is predominantly on the warehouse side, but I know, you know, some of the projects that we've been running internally. And obviously on the electric side, it's more about moving from a lead acid to a lithium, but even within lithium, we're talking about different chemistries. So you know, you got the nickel cobalt, and you've got phosphorus, and you got lithium titanate oxide. There's all these different types of chemistry within lithium, and there's all these developments that are happening. And how do you reduce the amount of cobalt, and how do you make it sustainable that you can extract it and mine it, and all those aspects. And I don't think lithium's done yet. I don't think that we are at this stage where we've had lead acid batteries for what, 100 years, and they didn't really change. And I think we're just at the beginning on the lithium story. And what's interesting is if you look at like a periodic table, energy storage sits in that top left corner, and it starts with hydrogen, and the one below it is lithium. And that area really lends itself to storage. And as a company, we've obviously invested in purchasing a fuel cell company for future growth. But to get the hydrogen today, it's not easy to get the hydrogen. You can extract it from natural gas. You can try and create it from water, going backwards. But yeah, we're not. There's scope there. The landscape looks like it's all in that direction, but we're not just there yet.
But you haven't mentioned internal combustion engine once there, I notice, in the warehouse sector. Is that because you think it's a done deal now? It's certainly in Europe.
Typically on class 2 and class 3 products, there is no IC engines. So we would only ever see them on a class 1 product, sorry, a class 4 product, because class 1 is also electric. So class 4 is the first time that we would see an IC engine. And that was sort of, if you look at places like Holland, there's more and more conversion over towards electric. The power output that we're getting from electric is becoming more comparable. So yeah, I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah.
From a counterbalance standpoint, I don't get involved much with our IC range inside warehouses. And if I did, it's normally because it's going to be a double pallet handler lifting 2 pallets high, 2 pallets wide, 4 pallets at a time from a curtain trailer, dropping it at an inbound staging. Or maybe it might be at the end of a very, very fast moving production line. I pick a name like Heineken, where you might have 1 pallet every 30 seconds. You need to double pallet handle. You need to move it quick. You end up with bigger trucks. But even then, I mean, electrically, we're going 9 ton and even 52 tons on reach stackers with hydrogen and lithium.
Yeah, I suppose one area, Ron, where you might see it in the warehouse, and this probably touches on Andy a little bit because it will be an LPG truck, is where you have, let's just say, a lead acid truck with double pallet handler. The gross vehicle weight becomes quite high. So actually going into the back of lorry beds and over your dock leveler can be a bit of an issue. Actually, your dock leveler capacity is usually okay, but it's your lorry bed floor loadings can get really high. You touch and go. And that's where an ICE truck, because it's got a lower gross vehicle weight, suddenly starts to come in. So often you'll see customers there having to make that choice. Do I change my operation to go electric, which probably aligns better actually with the rest of their application? Or do I go ICE and have that flexibility? So it's very application specific, I think.
That's a good point, Phil. Yeah.
And Phil, just coming back on that, how much in your experience are your clients' decisions made because of regulation, i.e. they're required to maybe go electric, or how much because they feel like they need to start paying serious attention to their carbon emissions?
Well, I think this is an interesting thing. So over the last couple of years, we've had an increasing amount of requests from customers. We've had a number of very large multinationals just going, I don't want to buy ICE trucks.
Yeah.
Because they've got their eyes on future legislation and emissions, and they just want to walk away. But the reality is there's the electric trucks just don't quite do the job they want just yet. Either application wise.
Just give us a bit of detail. I'm interested in that. Just give us a bit of detail on what they don't do, and then we'll.
So let's say, so your electric truck performance wise, whether it's lead acid or lithium ion, can be as good as your ICE truck. Mainly because most of the time people don't use their ICE trucks to 100% of their capability. Most of the time, actually, people are barely using half of their capability. So an electric truck is absolutely fine to swap out in most circumstances. However, charging, so convenient just to either change an LPG bottle or, fill it up again or fill up your diesel tank. Whereas with a lead acid truck, you might have to swap the battery. Not that great. With lithium ion, you might have to plug it in or opportunity charge it. And for that, that's psychologically often a very big step for a customer. So even if it does work for them and lithium ion would be the right thing, that's quite a brave step sometimes. And I think as an industry, as a forklift truck manufacturers, we need to really communicate that and work better with our customers to sort of say, actually, how can we make them feel comfortable about that change? Because we look at the technical data and go, you know what, you could get lithium ion to work, or maybe you're doing less than 1,500 hours per year. And you know what, lead acid is absolutely fine. You don't even need to change your battery. Why are you even looking at something else? So actually from an application side, a lot of the times you can change. It's beyond and again, as you go up more and more hours, maybe changing is not so easy. Maybe it isn't so easy to get that charging in. Flip side is if you're not doing many hours, actually the cost of ownership. So if we said your monthly rental, your maintenance, and your fuel cost, you know what, an ICE today still makes good sense as far as actually what's coming out of your wallet. So for a lot of customers, and especially if you're a larger business with a purchase manager, and you'll be really looking at that bottom line and that running cost, ICE still makes sense today. I think that's going to change very rapidly. But right now, for a lot of customers, it's still the right choice.
Right. And how far away are we from an electric solution that can assuage those concerns? You know, that very clear point you made about the value of IC.
Yeah, and I think, and this is about the cost of ownership. I think within the next 5 years, we'll be having electric trucks that can truly replace ICE. It's not just partially, which is where I think we are today, but actually do it for the right cost, the right performance, in very much a like for like type application. And I think that's tying nicely with you mentioned about the legal situation and that kind of legislation side. So it's interesting in a country like Holland. So there you're not allowed to run diesels indoor at all. So for a lot of customers, that's really said, you know, LPG is a nice interim solution for that. I'm sure Andy will touch on this. One of the bonuses with LPG is actually for CO2, it's also pretty good on emissions compared with diesel. So actually it's a real nice stepping stone. So in that marketplace, you know, for smaller trucks, diesel has just disappeared. It's now LPG, and really we've seen a lot of electric conversion. But like I said, the right electric truck just isn't quite there yet. So there's a little bit of a hesitancy. So LPG is still relevant and actually will be for a number of years yet. But it's interesting, recently come out is the Fit for 55 legislation, the proposed EU legislation there. And really that's saying, you know, 2030 is going to be a big year. They're saying we want to massively reduce our emissions from there. So I think there's going to be, certainly in the next, you know, the 5 to 10 year period, I think there's going to be quite an acceleration into electric trucks. There is always going to be a need for an ICE truck. Now the question will be, I think your choice of ICE truck as a customer will reduce, because as manufacturers, you know, we're going to see less demand. We're going to have to reduce the what options we have perhaps, but certainly I can't see them going away. And certainly for other markets, you know, we sell into Middle East and Africa as well, you know, they're going to continue to be built. So yeah, I think that's what I mean about a changing future. I think this next 10 years it's going to be quite, certainly from a manufacturer's point of view, it's quite exciting, and I think from a customer and a truck user's point of view, I think there's going to be a number of adaptations and changes that are going to have to come in the next 10 years. Brilliant
summary, Phil. Thank you for that. Andy, you are an expert in this sector, so take it away. Tell us all about LPG.
Well, it's quite interesting picking up on some of the points made earlier. I mean, we conducted a survey along with Vita, where we spoke to over 100 materials handling customers. And we asked them, you know, to prioritise at this moment in time what was important to them. Interestingly enough, 92% of them came back and said it was fuel efficiency. 90% obviously said it was cost, and 89% say it was the security of supply that was important to them. So we then went on to ask them basically what was important to them, and what they thought that maybe the industry or the government could do to actually encourage them to move over to something somewhat more sustainable. They felt that at the moment that there should be tax breaks and rewards. So like the carrot and stick syndrome, where you got rewarded if you managed to reduce your carbon footprint. And by the same token, on the other hand, you should be fined if you fail to achieve that, which was quite interesting. And obviously, I have an interest obviously in LPG, so we asked them about a product that we were on the market about bio LPG and what they understood at the moment about it. Where interestingly enough, a third of them came back and said they understood what LPG, what bio LPG was, and the fact that it could actually reduce their carbon footprint. But they also understood that in comparison to diesel trucks, they could actually cut their emissions by up to 98% on particulate matters, which again was quite interesting again. I think, picking up the future, I mean, the thing with bio LPG, it's a non-fossil fuel, and it is a renewable alternative. Which because you do get certified CO2 savings, which are certified by the Green Gas Certificate Group. And of course, the other benefits are obviously you've got a better weight to ratio and torque performance for the LPG trucks over electricity as well. Again, going back to the survey again, the other thing that concerned them a little bit was that electric can solve some of the issues, but it's not the total solution. And there was somewhat concern that there may be a risk of them having to change their electrical infrastructure to be able to use 100% electric trucks. And there was also concerned about availability of product, because obviously there's always the news you hear about a full electrical automation, whether it be on the automobile side or whether it be on the forklift side, that there's actually going to be enough product to be able to serve their total requirement, which I think is going to be somewhat of a challenge as well going forward. And there was a tad concern about downtime for the trucks, the time it actually took to recharge the trucks, because depending on the size of the fleet and obviously the infrastructure they're in, can take anything between 2 and 10 hours to actually charge the trucks. Where, of course, being in the LPG industry, we have a fantastic solution to that, because it's basically a drop in fuel. You literally pull alongside either a tank and refuel your truck in a matter of minutes, or you just replace the cylinder, which again takes a matter of minutes. So yeah, going forward, LPG certainly is a solution that's available now. And not in the future to come. It's actually available as we speak. So,
and do you feel that you're getting increasing acceptance for it from customers?
So certainly with the introduction of bio, I mean, because even bio at the moment offers you up to a 32% reduction in carbon. So at the moment in time, as a quick fix, why would you not do that? It's almost a no-brainer, and certainly for any existing LPG customers, I mean, it's actually cost neutral. So all it is basically signing up to be taken by LPG, so we can acquire the certification for it to go forward to include in your carbon submissions at the end of the year. So.
Yeah, I think an interesting one for you, Andy, as well, is especially for the LPG market. So in the UK, we've had a long period of being able to use red diesel in our forklift trucks. Yeah. As of April next year, that goes. There is a significant price hike to diesel. Now, in the UK, that may be a nail in the coffin, and LPG suddenly comes in as a cost-effective fuel. CO2 performance is significantly better than diesel. Okay, yeah, it's not electric, but it's, like I say, it's a great halfway house. So UK-based companies, I think if they're in that purchase cycle over the next, anywhere from now really into the next couple of years, I think LPG should really be on that consideration list as well. If you're wanting to go ICE, because tax wise, I think you've got a much better story to go that route. Like I say, it's not going to be right for everyone. Some people will sit with diesel, but certainly if you look at it from a cost of ownership point of view, LPG's kind of making some sense in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, and we are finding that, to be fair. We have obviously had a number of inquiries recently of people that currently are running red diesel, and the concerns that they have going forward, that they're going to see a threefold increase in the cost of products. So absolutely, that is proving quite favourable for us at this moment in time. So.
Yeah, you also touched on fuel efficiency as well, and I think that's a big thing. And I mean, it's interesting. We've always understood it with diesel and LPG. Obviously, you want to use the least as you can because it's just bottom line cost.
Yeah.
And electricity, it's only ever been a factor with runtime, with people saying, how long can I go before I have to change a battery or recharge?
Yeah.
I think what's really interesting, some of the news headlines that have recently been coming out about, wholesale gas prices going up across Europe. We had a fire this week, which has disturbed the electricity supply. Prices going up. That's not going to change. Electricity demand is going to continue to increase. Automotive is going electric. So there will be supply and demand issues on electric. Long term, it's going to be interesting to see where that progresses. I mean, I've kind of looked at it and I think our industry will move electric in time, in the majority. I'm pretty certain of that. Is it going to be a fix to all our problems? Is it going to always save us money? You know what? I'm not so sure. I think that, government and legislation wise, there's a lot of infrastructure they need to put in place. And frankly, in the UK, we're not really seeing that now. Europe's putting quite a big commitment down on the table with this Fit for 55 plan. Let's see what happens. There's already a lot of mutterings about certain European countries not happy with it and about costs being passing on to consumers and to businesses. So I think, like I say, it's a challenging period over these next few years.
Sure.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we find ourselves. I mean, ourselves as a company, we have a promise to our customers that we will supply a 100% bio LPG by 2040. And we're currently in the process of converting all our existing FLT customers over to bio to help us achieve that. It's a step closer to it. We do actually have two parties with the business. One within Cala, where we have our own sustainable experts now looking at other fuels going forward. One being RDME, which is the production of bio from 100% currently 100% unrecyclable materials such as plastic bags and whatever. So there's a lot of work going on in that particular front. Obviously, we're also looking at hydrogen, because that seems to be one of the buzzwords or one of the buzz fuels at this moment in time. Although I think it's a fair way away at the moment. And of course, obviously, we're looking at alternative places where we can purchase or obtain bio LPG from. Which I said earlier, which is actually a fuel that's actually here now and available now. So obviously there's a lot of focus on the bio side of the business for us.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly for the environment, and like you say, for a CO2 side, it's got to be the right thing to do, isn't it? Right now, working in that direction. I think that's definitely, it sounds like the responsible thing to be doing.
Oh, well, absolutely. But it still boils down to the same thing, doesn't it? Everybody has an environmental conscience, as long as it's cost neutral. So,
absolutely.
At the moment, so that's kind of the challenge as well, isn't it? So.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that's almost the problem with hydrogen right now, isn't it? You go, actually, the technology is reasonably established. Let's think automotive. Yeah. We go back best part of 20 years ago. Hydrogen prototypes coming out then. They've spent a lot of money to really get certainly something working. We've had quite a few inquiries about hydrogen, how it can meet the needs. People seem to think it will be cost effective right now, and it just isn't.
No.
But it's going to be part of the mix. And I think that is interesting, actually, in the Fit for 55 legislation. They're saying, they see for HGVs moving forward, across Europe, they're saying we are going to be putting in hydrogen fuel stations. Was it every 150k on major routes? That's a massive commitment. But what that's going to do is put in that infrastructure. And as soon as that starts to click in, that's going to flow through to the material handling business as well, because you kind of go, you know what, as a company, I've got a fleet of HGVs as part of my logistics business. You know what, I am going to run them on hydrogen, because that's a big tick for my environmental side, maybe also for my cost. So I'm going to put a filling station at base at the warehouse. Actually, I can use that for my forklift trucks as well.
Yeah.
And you suddenly start to go, you know, that little push of legislation might just open up that technology a little bit further for material handling. So like I say, this 10-year period is going to be really interesting, because we're going to see, it's almost that VHS Betamax fight kind of happening, isn't it? And I think actually, you know, all the fuels we have available will be present in somehow. It's just what mix we have in 10 years' time.
Well, Ron made the point about, you know, lithium, cobalt. There's only a finite quality of those substances that are going to be available, and if they're in demand, then the price is going to rise, just as we've seen with oil. So,
yeah,
who knows? Let's move on to the look of a forklift. I mean, 100 years old. Today's forklift still looks pretty much like the first one that was ever made, right? I mean, Ron, tell us, are we going to see forklifts in the future look any differently to how they do now?
I think, I mean, it would be nice to say that you could add some nice wheel arches and all these sort of things. Unfortunately, we're often confined by the space available. You want the truck to occupy as little space as you can, and if you look at the cube utilization in a warehouse, a counterbalance, typically only 39% of the warehouse is used for storage. The rest of it is for the truck to actually turn. So as an efficiency, you think that's not the best utilization of the space that I'm purchasing. And if you look at a reach truck's typically 51% of a building is needed for, you know, aisle space for a vehicle to maneuver and turn. So you're only using half the building to actually place a pallet and store it. So more and more, you want to try and make it as compact as you can. You want the driver to be as comfortable as possible. Like everything, we're getting bigger. I've got an old 50-year-old classic car, and the garage hate it when I take it in for an MOT because it can barely get in it. When you compare it to today's modern vehicles, and the same with lift trucks. You know, there's some old vehicles out there from the 70s, like the old Freya 5, that you would struggle to get in it. We want to make it a comfortable, ergonomic, you know, environment for the user, and space is a premium, and we need that, you know, to keep somebody on the truck comfortable for as long as possible, so they don't need to have as many breaks and things. So space is always going to be a challenge. It does lend itself potentially, if you do go fully automated, that you don't need that space perhaps. I mean, for us, that's not an area that we're particularly looking at getting rid of that operator compartment. So it then says, well, what materials can you use that are different? You know, different types of plastics and things like that. You know, more recently, we've been using the material that they use for motorcycle helmets. It's got a lot of flexibility. It's very durable. It holds its shine. It can withstand hard impacts and things like that. You can mold it into different shapes. So it's really about then aesthetically, what can you make it look attractive? But the footprint needs to remain the same. And we recently launched a vehicle with LED lighting around the edges. I wouldn't say it was completely like the movie Tron, but those sort of accents where the styling now can be modified and changed just by adding light to particular areas and things. But at the end of the day, you need a pair of forks that are going to go into a standard pallet, and you want to do it in the area that occupies the least amount of space. So yeah, I don't know if it's going to change drastically from what we've seen. Certainly there'll be fashions, whether it's 20 years ago, everything had a radius and a curve to it. Now it's sort of got hard line edges and straight bits, and who knows what the next 10 years, does it look like an old Sierra, or does it go to like a stealth fighter, or there does seem to be a fashion behind it, doesn't there?
It does. Phil, what do you think?
Well, it's interesting thinking specifically about counterbalance trucks as well. Like you said, those have not changed in format for a long time, and actually I'm not sure the fundamentals will, to be honest. Masts are an interesting one. Hydraulics, it's not necessarily loved. They do occasionally leak. There's maintenance there, with chains, rollers, etc. But the reality is actually, as a cost-effective solution, there is not a near-term solution to do that differently. It's actually it's highly efficient at that job. It will be interesting to see how much what you're seeing is actuators. So, for example, let's just say tilt cylinders or something like that. Those kind of items you could be seeing become more electrified. That might be an option. So that allows you to do some different packaging things across the truck. But as far as a quick glance, the truck shape's not going to change. I think what's interesting is more the ergonomics and the driver side. So if we go to your traditional forklift truck, it's either got an engine in the middle or a big battery, a big lead acid battery. And I think the interesting thing about lithium ion batteries, because they can be smaller, is it opens up some different packaging potential in the truck. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with that. Fuel cell as well. Fuel cell generally takes up a bit more space than maybe a lithium ion would do. But I think that kind of format of truck as well will give some potential sort of packaging variation, shall we say, which has got to be good for the driver, because ultimately that should give the driver more space, better seating positions. And certainly if you're a customer that's doing very long hours, that's got to be better. And that'll also give you opportunity to have, I don't know, let's just say longer suspension travel seats. So those kind of, especially if you work on slightly rougher terrains, or you're going across dock levelers, you're going to have better ergonomics and long-term health for your drivers.
Sure. Andy, anything to add to that particular question about how they might look?
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've been in this industry for 40 years now, and you are right. The forklift truck looks the same now as it did way back then. Maybe with the exception is the driver certainly afforded a lot more comfort than he was back in the day. So I think a lot of effort's been made into ensuring that the driver's well-being and safety is certainly paramount, and so it should be as well. But but interestingly enough, I think what you tend to see anyway, a lot of the new distribution centres are still designed in and around the necessity for forklift trucks to operate inside at this moment in time. Although I do see, you are right, that the future probably will start to dictate that more and more warehouse space is going to be required for actually storing products rather than the automation taking up all the space. So
interesting points.
Yeah.
What about your customers and payment models? Are we going to see changes there? Are customers going to buy? Are they going to lease, rent? Are they going to buy new? Are they going to buy second-hand in more quantities, as we've seen in, for example, the automotive market recently in the UK? Ron, what do you think?
I think, I mean, when you look at the investments that you're making, particularly if you look at robotics as an example, we could offer a robotic vehicle that would cost you about £40,000 a year. When you look at it that way, If that helps you redeploy a person to another task, that's not a lot of money, really, is it? And that would, include the servicing and the maintenance and the upkeep and everything. And that, to me, that's a compelling way of looking at it. And you can do the initial outlay and pay for everything up front, a more traditional way. And I think that probably with automation might have had its way, because they were not that flexible. Now, the real big change, particularly when you look at automation, is how much more flexible they are. Automation is not new. We've had it for 30, 40 years. But what's really changed in the industry is how quickly you can implement and how quickly you can actually change it, or make changes to it. And it's that flexibility that is helping making it affordable, because it's reducing our installation costs. An installation cost is just burning labor. So if you want to finance something, it's difficult to finance labor. It's much easier to finance an asset where the bank can quantify it, so to speak. So that ability to then finance a project where the element of installation and that labor is diluted so much that it's now more about the cost of the vehicle, makes it easier to access. So I think from that perspective, we'll see it. And while the rates they've been very good, haven't they? Last 10 years or so. When you think of what the interest rates were going back 25 years ago, we're in a place where leasing and contract hire and those sort of things, they're very, very attractive. And even outside of the world of the forklift truck, but the other things that are around it, by financing and leasing those, what we've seen in a lot of companies is that it's difficult to get a sign off to spend money on little things that perhaps have got, they're over 50,000, that have to go up to a senior level for approval. Yet if they're financed, it's quite easy to just keep rolling that over, and you're paying 5,000 a year or something, and that's being maintained. And the ethos of having independent distribution and things like that, for us, that is one of the areas where it's not just about our lift truck, but it's about the other areas. About many of our dealers will specialize in looking after dock levelers or scissor lift tables, or other things that are outside of that, but also the financing of it and looking after it. So if it's trailers for a tow tractor, you don't then have to worry in 10 years of where do you find the money to replace all your trailers. I think the financing there, it gives an element of a peace of mind. You're not going to be hit by a big bill, and you know what your operational costs are and what they're going to be throughout the life of it. And particularly if you look at logistics, you probably only got contracts that maybe look out towards 3 years. You might be able to have dependency on understanding that historically you've always had that contract and there's a high probability that it will continue, but there's no guarantee behind that. So you kind of want to minimize those risks.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Ron. Phil, have you got a view?
Yes, currently we're running around about 75 to 80% lease across Europe. And ultimately, if you look to value to the customer, it's generally the cheapest way to do it. Obviously, there's some customers, leasing for their own business reasons. Let's just say they're a cash risk company, they don't like to lease. There's always going to be that. But I think for the majority, leasing is the right route to go. Ron touched on many reasons actually why you'd want to do that. I think what's interesting is the more and more requests we have for an hourly rate, to pay per hour or to pay per pallet moved. That's an interesting one, because actually talking with our once again independent dealers about it is, you go, actually, how do they calculate that? Essentially what they basically do is use their usual lease rate and just aggregate that into your hourly rate. So actually, for a customer, you know what, I think if you want to pay that way, I think you're going to find forklift truck manufacturers and dealers responsive to that. But ultimately, it's not gonna make it cheaper. It's not going to change the way you pay. It's just a different format, if that's how you want to take it on. I think the cost per pallet moved is an interesting one, because that's quite a new kind of format, and
That's a little bit like an Uber, isn't it, Phil?
It is, yeah. And what's difficult is you've got to sit there and you go, essentially, you go, well, I might move 10 pallets a day, I might move 20. Well, okay, actually, on a day basis, it's not too bad. So when you aggregate it over the year, does that even out? So the dealer goes, actually, because he thinks per hour reasonably, is that 2,000 hours per year that truck's being used, or is that 4,000? And he's got to plan that maintenance in. So by working in such a small metric as a customer, you make the job quite difficult for a dealer. So the likelihood is he's going to put more safety in that. And I think that's the aspect where that might be difficult for your forklift truck supplier to do that in a very cost effective way, whereas your normal lease rate based on hours is a very known rate. And often, most companies, as Ron's as well with Yale, as well as others, will be quite flexible. If you sign a contract for 2,000 hours per year, let's just say, you know what, if it's 2,500, that's usually going to be fine. They'll work that out. If it goes up to 3,000, well, okay, you just let them know. They'll just adjust the rate accordingly. So I think there's a lot of flexibility in leasing, and I think that's something you don't necessarily get with a straight purchase. Hence why it's so popular.
Thank you. And Andy, anything to add on that, how you think the financing might work?
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously a number of the businesses that we deal with, certainly the big supermarket chains, and again, the brewery industry, they seem to have gone down the route more of either short-term hire or leasing to try and head off the peaks and troughs that they experience over certain times of the year. Now, whether the last 18 months or 2 years has impacted upon that with COVID, where there's been a reluctance to maybe to commit too much financially going forward on maybe the outright purchase of trucks, I kind of guess remains to be seen. But another good point is that, there's more and more businesses now going down the route of contracting out the management of their warehouses for 2, 3, 4 year periods. Now, obviously, there's a reluctance there for those people that have been awarded those contracts to go out and go out and potentially buy new trucks. They'd rather go down the leasing avenue, where they're not actually tied into having an expensive piece of equipment based at a site that they may only be supplying for a 2 or 3 year period. And you tend to see contracts changing hands more and more frequently now than you ever used to. And I think a lot of that is down to the fact that the contract tends to be managed more and more by professional procurement people, and decision being made by professional procurement people, rather than the older days where it may have been the operational director who had more of a sway. So I think the financial or the economic part is having more and more of a bearing than maybe ever used to.
Yeah, it's an interesting, fascinating view. Guys, I'd love to carry on. You've given us so much insight here, but we are out of time. Just to say thank you to you. To our audience, please do, any questions, do use the text facility. I wanted to give our panelists the chance to talk about a use case or a customer success story, but their sort of wisdom has been so forthcoming that we haven't had a chance to do that. So please do go to their websites, exhibitor stands, Cala, Heister and Yale, and you'll get a chance to see those there. So thank you very much to Andy Kellett from Cala, Phil Mean from Heister, and Ron Farr from Yale. Thanks for your time today, guys.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.